Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the President and CEO of the Pew Charitable Trusts, Susan K. Uran.
Good morning. I'm delighted to join you and to welcome our next panel. I do want to start by thanking President Bush for hosting this forum on the role that leadership plays in preserving American democracy and creating a more perfect union. This year's honorees exemplify that kind of leadership, and I'm grateful to each of them for the contributions they've made to our country. I want to talk about something for a few minutes that's been on my mind and may have been on your mind as well, and that is how do we rebuild trust in our public institutions and our democratic institutions. This trust is absolutely essential if we're going to preserve government by and for the people, but it's becoming increasingly difficult in these divisive times. About 2 in 3 adults agree that a low level of trust in government makes it harder to solve our nation's problems, and a whopping 85% of Americans say that they don't think elected officials care what people like them think. Next year, we'll be celebrating 250 years of American independence, and I hope that's going to provide an opportunity for us to reverse these trends, to begin to rebuild trust, and to move our country forward. So Pew is based in Philadelphia, the birthplace of American democracy, and we consider democracy to be the cornerstone of our work. You may know us best from the Pew Research Center and the data that it generates that reflects society's voices, enriches the public dialogue, and supports thoughtful decision-making. But we also have a long history of nonpartisan, data-driven work that focuses on improving policy and producing measurable and positive impacts for all Americans. Now, the democratic process can be messy, and we know that strengthening democratic institutions is essential to future prosperity for American families and communities. And at times when political divisions are entrenched, a nonpartisan approach can encourage healthy dialogue and compromise focused on solving problems and on serving the public. A fact-based approach is especially needed now when Americans are losing faith in the ability of their government to understand and serve their needs. But facts are not enough. To be successful, we must also do the truly hard work of engaging with people who bring different perspectives to the table. While we may focus on party affiliation when we go to the polls, our fellow citizens are all multifaceted individuals playing different roles at home and in their communities, and they are often looking for help in building common ground. As you'll hear from the next panel, mutual understanding, facts and trust, and the democratic institutions that depend on them are fostered by a vigorous fourth estate. But like many other American institutions, trust in the media has declined, and more people are getting their information from non-traditional sources. The drift toward non-traditional news is striking. So to take just one example, in the 3 years between 2020 and 2023, the share of U.S. adults who regularly got news from TikTok rose from 3% to 14%. And about 1 in 5 Americans say that they get news from online influencers, and that's primarily individuals rather than media outlets. This is why the Pew Research Center is partnering with the Knight Foundation to improve our understanding of how Americans gather information and how that information fuels beliefs, shapes identities, and forges communities and affects civic participation. We hope that by examining these trends, we can develop a fact-based foundation that leaders in government and the press can use to help restore trust. And that's exactly the conversation that we're about to engage in with our next panel on restoring trust in the media, featuring Marty Barron, the former executive editor of the Washington Post, and Jessica Yellin, the founder of News Not Noise, and it's moderated by Nicole Bibbins Sedaca from the George W. Bush Institute. I am very much looking forward to hearing what these remarkable media leaders have to say. So please join me in welcoming the next panel.
Well, I am delighted to be moderating this conversation, which is extraordinarily important and timely, as we all know. What we know is that free and independent press is absolutely essential to a healthy and vibrant democracy. A free and independent press is how we get information and analysis that allows us as citizens to be engaged in our society. Free and media and independent press reports on government action, which is extraordinarily important to government accountability. And it allows a public debate to be encouraged in a society to ensure that we are part of the conversations that impact us every day. The First Amendment contains an explicit protection of the freedom of the press, which recognizes the centrality of a free and independent press. And our topic today of restoring trust in media is timely because, according to a recent Gallup poll, just 31% of Americans express confidence in radio, television, and newspapers to report the news fairly and accurately. And unfortunately, mass media came in last out of 10 civic and political institutions that the survey included. And yet, a free and independent press is one of the most important cornerstones of a democracy. So I am thrilled to be joined by two extraordinary journalists who understand the importance of our press in a healthy democracy and have been an extraordinarily important part of that themselves in their distinguished careers. So Marty, let me start with you. Let's take a historical look at the importance of free expression in the United States and within a healthy democracy. Can you just give us a historical perspective of what that has looked like and how that's evolved in the United States?
Sure, it's been a long and rocky road, but I'll have to give you the TikTok version. Actually the inaugural edition of the first newspaper in this land was in 1690. It was published, and then the very next day, the colonial governor and council of Massachusetts shut it down. And they said that the printing press was the source of libel against the best government. Apologize if the language sounds familiar. And then, jump ahead, 1791, we got the ratification of the Bill of Rights. And that, of course, had the First Amendment, which provided for free expression, free press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition your government for grievances, all of that. So that was good news for the press, obviously. But then only 7 years later, John Adams, the second president of the United States, signed the Sedition Act. And that made it really difficult, and it was actually against the law to incite opposition to any law passed by Congress or any act of the President of the United States. It was one of the most repressive measures in the history of the country against a free press. Thankfully, the American public actually rose up against that. James Madison, who was the principal author of the First Amendment, talked about the need for freely examining public measures, public characters and measures. And he talked about the First Amendment as being, the free press actually being the most effectual guarantor of all other rights. So that was good, and then finally that act expired with John Adams out of office, and Thomas Jefferson came in and said the diffusion of information was essential in this country, and that the free press was essential to governance in this country as well. And you jump ahead then to, so a lot of jumping here, it's the TikTok version after all. And you jump ahead to, let's say, to 1917, Woodrow Wilson in office, one of the most repressive times, basically prohibiting criticism of government and of the military, and a really difficult time. So much so that Teddy Roosevelt, one of his predecessors, said that he had criminalized the truth, actually, and so you had, under Woodrow Wilson, you had another Sedition Act. You had the Espionage Act of 1917. The Sedition Act went away. Ultimately, the Espionage Act still exists today, the Espionage Act of 1917. And frankly, I'm confident that at some point that's going to be weaponized again against the press. We really did not develop sort of the real freedoms that we have today for the press until about basically until World War II, and with FDR, who supported that, and people saw the consequences of not having freedom of expression, not having a free press. They saw that in the Third Reich. They saw that in Imperial Japan. And so at the time, the Supreme Court robustly supported freedom of the press, and famously, Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson talked about how every person in this country needs to be his own watchman for the truth, because you can't trust any government to distinguish the truth, what's true from what's false. And so that's where we are today. And it's been a rocky road. Remains a rocky for the press and for free expression generally. And I would just point out that the rights for the press are really the same rights as everybody else. We don't have any special rights. It's the right of free expression, the same right that provides for free expression by all people, by expression in terms of religion, expression in terms of assembly, and in terms of any right to petition your government.
Mm-hmm. That was an extraordinary overview, and just a reminder also that these have been heavily debated issues from the founding, prior to the founding of our country, and really very different visions. And yet this principle of the importance of truth and fact-based reporting and of an independent press has been a thread that has been woven through the fabric of our nation from the very beginning. Jessica, the media industry is facing many challenges. I will start with a very underreported statement. Can you speak to some of those challenges that the industry is facing and highlight how particularly the expansion of the digital space has been a major opportunity and a challenge?
Yes. First, may I say thank you to President and Mrs. Bush and the Bush Center for having me and for including the press in a conversation about America's leadership. It is important, and it is also reassuring as a journalist that it's included. Thank you. And Marty, I want to say you're one of my personal reporting heroes. So it feels very special to share a stage with you and to watch you do your first TikTok.
Oh, yeah. If only
You
it
saw it
were.
here.
We can
It's
get
not
you
fake news at all.
all set
Can you
up.
get me on? That'd
With
be
an
great.
account, yeah, we'll work on it. Get you some followers. So, listen, we're not breaking news if we say that the media is facing enormous challenges. There's the loss of trust by the public, which we heard Pew talk about, and I was going to quote their numbers, but better to hear it from Pew directly. There's the threat that they are facing and that media companies are facing on a business level from new platforms, from Facebook and all these, TikTok, et cetera. There is the challenge of, people inside the media, this new media, fuzzying up what truth is, and then there are these attacks coming from the political sphere on the press. All of this is true, and all of it is a threat that we talk about at great length. I would like to also push against one piece of conventional wisdom, which is that the audience doesn't want truth. And I will tell you that I do my work on social media all day, every day. I'm back there posting before I came out here. I'm in direct contact with people all day. And the number one question I get is this true? And they'll forward me something and ask me to answer that question. Now, it speaks to the problem, which is they don't know how to answer it for themselves, and I know we'll talk about that, but I also want to underscore that it is meaningful that they want to know, and that they're coming to me, a person they know has years of checking facts, right, and confirming with sources to get that information. Quickly, so you have a sense, because I'm a new media kind of entity, I left legacy media it's been like 10 years now. And I had the experience while I was in journalism as a political reporter of interviewing undecided voters all the time who would yell at me because they didn't understand what we were talking about in the news. And I decided I was going to go where this piece of the audience is and do the news on Instagram. And I started explaining the news in 3-minute videos on Instagram going back 6 years now. And fast forward, I have a large audience, I'm engaged. What I've done is now become a model for many others to do it too. And I think of what I do, if you think of Uber as the last mile in transportation, I'm the first mile in news. I help you know what a tariff is, I help you understand what the bond market is. I say this is a story that matters, that one you can ignore. And there's an audience that wants that. The question is, what do we do now to help find more of them and connect them with more sources they can trust?
I do want to come back to that because I do think the role of the audience, of the consumer of information is extraordinarily important, because quite often we're focused just on the industry and its responsibility and its role. But at the end of the day, each of us as individual citizens has a tremendous amount of agency to be in this. Marty, so the title of our panel is Restoring Trust in Media. We are facing a denigration of trust and the devaluing of expertise and objective fact. Why do you think that is? And how can the press continue to play its crucial role amidst what is really a broader societal trend in mistrust in institutions, but also mistrust in truth?
Yeah. Well, it's a complicated issue. And I do think we have a serious problem in this country. We as a society cannot agree on a common set of facts. And it's actually worse than that. We can't even agree on how to determine how one determines what is a fact, because so much of what we've used in the past historically to determine facts has been devalued or denied or denigrated. So things like education, things like expertise, things like experience, and things like, above all, actual evidence, what you can see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears. All of that's been devalued, and that's a very dangerous place to be, not just for the press, obviously, but for democracy and then for societal progress overall. You know, with regard to the press, you know, the decline, actually the high point was really about at the time of Watergate, and because of the press's reporting on Watergate, because that reporting was ultimately validated, as controversial as it was at the time. And then people saw that what, particularly the Washington Post, but others had reported about President Nixon at the time, turned out to be true. And so there were 70% approval ratings for the press at the time. You can see how far we've fallen. Yeah. There's been a long, steady decline since that period of time, but it's really accelerated, I think, pretty much at the time of where the internet became something that everybody used. The internet has facilitated a real fragmentation in the media market. Anybody can go anywhere to find some site that affirms their pre-existing view of the world. And people like to be told that what they believe is true, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think we're at a stage where a lot of people, they've confused beliefs with facts. And so we have enormous fragmentation, an enormous number of outlets, and that's the challenge that we have, one of the challenges that we have today, and people don't know what to believe, what's true, who should they believe, on what basis. With regard to the legacy press, I always like being called legacy because I'm certainly of the age that qualifies me as legacy. But it's a kind word. But by the way, I've done 2 TikToks before this as well, so just want you to know you can all research them and go find them. They're all hilarious.
Everybody's starting to look, Googling them.
But anyway, I mean, what do we do? I mean, I think that we need to, first of all, I think the press needs to cover its community and its country fully and fairly, writing about people so that they see their lives accurately and honestly and honorably reflected in our coverage. All of their struggles, which there are many, their worries, their expectations for themselves and their families, and apart from politics, just what are their lives like, what are they struggling against, what do they hope for, all of that. I think that's really important that we do that. Secondly, I think it's really important that we be much more transparent about how we go about our work and the work that we do. So I'm not just saying who we are, but all the work that was done, because somehow people think that we just sat there and made stuff up, when in fact reporters are all over the country, all over the world, including in conflict zones, putting their own lives at risk in many instances to gather information and disseminate it. So whenever there's a court document, we need to show that court document. We have the tools to do that on the internet, the whole document, so that people can see where it came from. Same thing with a video, show the entire video. People can see whether or not we took it out of context, the entire audio, and whenever there's a data set, we need to point people to that data set with a link, say this is where that information comes from, and the message to people needs to be, this is the work we did, you have a right to check it, we're going to give you the opportunity to check it, you can see whether we took anything out of context, and that should be the signal. And then the final thing that we need to do is we need to recognize that our forms of communication are not working today. The way that people are consuming information has changed dramatically. All of you who have kids or grandkids can see that. Jessica is at the forefront of that with new media, is finding new ways to communicate. And we at established communications companies, we should recognize this nasty fact, which is that we are failing to communicate effectively. And so we need to find new ways of communicating that communicate authenticity. You know, we focus so much on authority, all the reporting that we've done, going deep, but there's distrust in institutions generally. Senator Sass was talking about that eloquently before. And there's distrust in all institutions, not just in the press, but in all institutions, in Congress, the presidency, big business, pharmaceutical companies, you name it, across the board, with the notable exception of the military. And so we come across as an institution that people don't trust. Podcasters and influencers and sort of emerging media outlets are communicating authenticity. And we need to figure out how to communicate authenticity, otherwise we don't get credit for authority. And so there are a number of things that we need to work on. Throughout, I think we actually need to remain totally committed to our mission in journalism, which is to give, as I define it, to give the public the information it needs and deserves to know so that people can govern themselves. And at the heart of that mission is, James Madison talked about freely examining public characters and measures, and the word examining always sticks out to me. It means that we need to go behind the curtain and beneath the surface about what's happening in our government and what's happening with others who have disproportionate influence on our society and on our democracy. And that's at the core, is that we need to do that. That's the accountability function of the press. And we need to be able to, do that fearlessly. But we also need to hold ourselves to really the highest possible standards, to be professional at all times. And I worry that, frankly, that there's been an erosion in standards in journalism, and I've been a big critic of that erosion of standards in journalism.
I'd love to come back to that particular question, but Jessica, let me go to you. Can you speak to this issue also of trust in media, particularly from the perspective of digital media? Marty's talked about just the fact that there is a proliferation of different platforms and there's a different way that people consume media. Like, what do we need to understand about this moment and about how both legacy media and digital, like the expansion of it, what does that look like?
So to underscore something Marty said, the trust is shifting from institutions, right, like brands, to individuals. So an example, people might not trust the Wall Street Journal as a brand, but they might love a reporter at the Wall Street Journal that they follow on social. I've heard from my audience that they feel like they know me as well as a member of their own family, because mom calls on the phone and you see her in FaceTime, boyfriend calls, and then there I am doing a video. It's this intimate, right, they call it the parasocial relationship. But this extends to all the people who are in new media, right, have these different relationships, and there's so much, it's the Wild West of information. First, as we all know, you have more information in this phone coming at you at all times than we've ever had in the history of humanity. It's overwhelming, it's exhausting, a lot of it's negative. Algorithms are designed to feed you more content that triggers strong emotions, rage and outrage lead, right? So you have the people who are pushing anger, pushing partisanship, also perform, they get bigger numbers, they get in your feed more. There's also a conspiracy world out there where, my gosh, I could tell you about these 20 extra continents that were never talked about in school that live behind the ice in Antarctica and control us all. You can spend a day watching videos about this, or about how Blue Origin, and there's plenty of conversation about it, the rocket ship with all the women in it, never actually went up. It's all a fake, right? It's all on a green screen. So there's that. There's also this other area where you have creators who have this strong bond I'm talking about of trust, talking to their audience often about health, and insisting that this supplement is good in that, and they're not revealing that they're paid to say that, right? So there's something like, I can't remember the stat right now, but more than 60% of people who are talking about a brand are not telling you that they're paid by the brand or actually themselves monetizing off it. Then there's this other category online now of political people who are bringing you the news, and they seem like they're newscasters, and in fact they're paid for by political action committees. Political money that has a mission. That's not, it might be fact-based and it's fine to consume it, but it's not disclosed. Yeah. And so one of the challenges now is, how do we get our arms around what's happening in this world? We know that the platforms are not going to do something, right? They're going to do, if anything, the wrong thing, feeding you more of the bad stuff. To just wrap it up, the platforms in the last month declared that they're all out of the content moderation game. They're not fact-checking. We're on our own. So this is an opportunity and a call to action for those of us who care to figure out what we're going to do outside the platforms, what institutions, what tools, and what structures we need to stand up to be entrepreneurial and innovative, to help both the creator community that is based on fact know how to talk about it, talk about whether they're practicing journalism, and help the audience meet up. And there are solutions we can get behind.
Can you just give a few of those solutions? Because I'm just thinking also, if we're looking at 60% of the people who are sharing, or not sharing the fact that they are paid to talk about whatever health supplement that they are advertising, or there are other people who come across as news, what are the ways? Is that a governmental action? Is that citizen education? Like, where is the locus of change?
This is my favorite question.
Oh,
all
great.
these panels
It wasn't
really
even on my
focus on the
card.
problem part, the first third of the deck, and never get to like the solution part.
Great.
What can we get behind? 3 things, if I'm going to remember them all. First, just like you have a LEED certification for a building, this follows certain standards. There can be outside entities that set up standards. This is what a journalist does when they're this is journalistic practices. And individuals can apply to get that check mark. Yes, there'll be some that are on the right. Yes, there'll be some on the left, maybe. But then an outside audience can know those are, if I like this creator, if I like Jessica, here are the other people who practice journalism like her. That's one idea, right? Problems with it, there's solutions. Another is we could use a backbone for people who are news creators to know, like, what if they could get some educational material that Marty Barron teaches, here's what it is to be a journalist, here's how you check a source. Some of these people would love to, they don't know. How do you have editorial oversight, legal checking, networking with each other? Every time I'm reporting on nutrition, I shouldn't have to learn this thing because RFK said it. There's somebody out there who knows. Okay, that's 2. 3 is we can be the distribution arm for legacy media. There should be a major media brand that partners with me and says, would you put out our content? I already do it every day. I put up in stories on Instagram, these are the important stories. I link to the Wall Street Journal, I link to NBC. I'm telling my audience you can trust these places. That should be formalized. Those are 3 solutions we can execute on now.
Excellent, excellent. Marty, let me come back to you. Free expression is naturally not just a question, as we said, for journalists. It's a broader societal issue. And you mentioned the declining trust that we're seeing in institutions across the board. What are you seeing in other industries or sectors that concern you and will impact, or is probably already impacting, the media industry and freedom of the press?
Well, I think this was discussed a little bit at the first panel today. People talking about how people are afraid to speak up for reprisal, for fear of reprisal, afraid to speak up because they'll be attacked in some way, maybe even physically attacked. That's the environment that we're living in today, and it's very sad. I really think that there needs to be, often when we talk about free expression, people think that that's something for the press, and the press has been the biggest advocate for free expression. But it's not just a right for the press, it's a right for everyone. It's a right for businesses to be able to advocate for the policies that they actually believe in. There should be in my view, there should be a business constituency for free expression. There should be in higher education. Obviously, the whole notion of higher education is that there should be free expression. And notwithstanding all the debates about how well they do that and cancel culture and all of that, the goal should be that everybody should be able to speak freely and learn from each other, and not fear that they are going to suffer consequences for merely having spoken up. And in many instances spoken up truthfully about the history of the country or the history of the world or whatever it might be. And so I think that there needs to be sort of a broad coalition in support of free expression that includes the press but is not exclusive to the press. And I worry that we're losing our sense that we're entitled to free expression, and that not we are just entitled to free expression, that you are entitled to free expression too, even if you disagree with me. So I would love to see something like that. I fear I do feel that there is an erosion in free expression, and an erosion in people feeling that they were going to suffer reprisals for having spoken up.
Mm-hmm. And where does the education of the average person, where is that locus? Is that in our schools? Is that in our universities? Is that the responsibility of the media to help the average person understand freedom of the press, but also freedom of expression, as you're saying, is not just this abstract thing that someone else has to worry about. It is our all day, every day.
Well, it's all of those places, actually. I think that, look, it is in the First Amendment, so we should learn that. We should learn that as part of civic education, certainly in the schools, and learn exactly what that means and why there are so many great advantages to that. And that it's a foundation, it's one of the fundamental principles of our society, along with things like rule of law, okay? I think that certainly the press needs to advocate for itself. I don't think we've done a very good job of that, of even explaining how we do our jobs and how it's different from everybody else. But why we need to have free expression. But that's got to come from the schools, got to come from, grade school to high school, to middle school, to high school, to college. And certainly from the press and lots of other institutions. I think all of them have to be part of that. I'm a big supporter, for example, of a news organization called the News Literacy Project, which has, and their job is to try to train people to be critical consumers of, it's totally nonpartisan, critical consumers of information, how to evaluate information, what kinds of questions you need to ask in order to assess whether this is a reliable source of information or an unreliable source of information. And I think that's really important to do as well.
Excellent. Jessica, what responsibility does the consumer of information play in ensuring that we have a strong, vibrant, free, and independent press?
We all have to take responsibility for I always call it our information diet. Just like you think about what you're putting in your mouth, you have to think about what you're putting in your brain. And it's a new world, right? And part of what media literacy is, and they've adapted to talk about the digital space, and Pointer does it too. How do you teach sort of the next generation to be smart about what they're consuming? I have a friend from college who's very smart, but doesn't always act it, and sends me all these videos saying, why aren't you reporting this? And you look at the video and it's from Fiery Cat 789. And I look at who is Fiery Cat, and there's no information about where this is coming from. Like, why do you trust this? So teaching kids and others to stop your scroll, look at that byline or the name, go back and see if you can find out who this person is or what their credentials are. That's a piece of it, yes. But there's no amount of media literacy or critical thinking that can empower people to really decipher our new media landscape yet, because we haven't built the infrastructure and tools that give the people who care about the truth the clues to know who's in and who's not. So what I mean is, for example, when I said that my number one question is this true? I will respond to people. Very often they'll send me something that's quite obviously to me true or quite obviously not true. And I'll respond and I'll give them their answer. And I assumed at first they didn't know how to find that out. So I'd say, just so you know, you could Google this with these keywords or go to this source. And they go, oh, I know. It's just that Google would give me 20 million results, and how do I know which to believe? I trust you. So people feel deeply disempowered in their discernment because they don't know how to navigate this minefield. And I think we are in the media at a stage akin to where the music industry was when streaming came on board. The music industry, when streaming started, said, streaming's terrible, put it back in the box. But you can't do that. So what did they do? Eventually they adapted. And there are new protocols and new ways to take new streaming stars and make them trusted by lots of people, followed, but pair them up with some new tools, some new infrastructure, and with old labels in new ways. So they've found a bridge to adapt the old and new. We are in the cusp of building that. We need to start now.
Who regulates or oversees that labeling? And how does that get done, or who would? If we were to pursue some sort of labeling?
I mean, my proposal or belief is we need outside entities. They can be philanthropic that do this. And every time I pitch this, people are like, well, somebody's going to discredit it as untrue, or this person's going to be in and out. Fine, start, adapt. Maybe there'll be some that are lefty. Maybe there'll be some that are righty. At least you have a place where if you're a fact-based person, you can know and get a clue. It used to be the check mark on Twitter told you.
Right.
But we all know you can buy that now. It means nothing. So it's not even Twitter anymore. So my point is, I've just been frustrated that every time I start conversations with funders or philanthropies, it's just too new of a world that not ready to engage, and it's later than we think. I think we need to just start trying some things off platform on our own to build this new infrastructure.
Okay. And is the philanthropic community recognizing this moment that we're in and the need to? There we go.
I think it has, first of all, it should be entrepreneurial private individuals who get what it means to take a risk and have, an investment that's not going to 20x, but will be self-sustaining and profitable because it matters. And philanthropies, my challenge has been there's a lot of interest in local news, and then there's an interest in identity-driven news, and then just human news and digital space, there's not support for that. I've even tried to apply for awards, and I don't know which box to check. I'm not legacy, I'm not podcast, I don't know. So we haven't moved into this moment of new fact creator-based news.
Let me turn to both of you. At the Bush Institute, we always focus on being action-oriented. And so I would love, you've given quite a few specific next steps that we need to think about, but I want to make sure that I give each of you time to really think about what are those and share with the audience what those specific action items are, either for individuals and those of us who are consumers of media, for legacy or newer platforms, or the philanthropic or other communities as they're thinking about this moment. What are some of those action items that I think that should be on top of our mind of capturing this moment and addressing what is a crucial issue?
Well, this would be a pretty broad response, so I apologize for that. It's not like 10 easy steps to fixing this problem, because it's a very difficult problem. I think all of us in a variety of institutions need to get away from performative behavior and move to thinking, how do we perform in the public interest, okay? There's way too much performative behavior in the media, on social media, people trying to draw attention to themselves rather than really bringing attention to the needs of ordinary people. And I think that's true in Congress, by the way, as well. A lot of performative behavior, merely to draw attention to themselves, to raise money, whatever it is, as opposed to thinking, how do we actually do something that can be constructive here and work together to accomplish that. That's number one. Number two is that I think we have to move away from demonizing other people and moving to a place where we actually respect other people and we recognize that these are human beings. They may have a different worldview, and you want to understand what that worldview is. You're not obligated to agree with their worldview, but that they're not enemies. They are not garbage. All of that. I think that's really important. And then the third thing that I would mention is that I really think we need to all be committed to the pillars of our democracy and recognize what those pillars are. Obviously, I've dedicated my career and my life to one of those, which is a free press. The founders of the country did think that was a pillar of democracy, and I happen to believe and to know that there is no, and never has been, any democracy without a free and independent press. There cannot be, and that's why leaders who are moving in an authoritarian direction hope to extinguish an independent press. That's the first step in extinguishing the rights of all citizens and the rights of all citizens to express themselves. But all of the pillars of our democracy are courts. We need to commit ourselves to making sure that our courts are strong and independent. Yes. We need to make sure that our Congress performs its job of actually looking into things and not being a rubber stamp. And we need to certainly respect the presidency, the role of the presidency, but also recognize that the presidency is not the government. The government is much broader than that, and our democracy is much broader than that. And so those are the three things that I would say that all of us in all institutions and all Americans that we ought to be committed to, including those of us in the press.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, because I think those are the fundamental pieces of a democracy, and I think those of us who have studied international democracy in the world and watched it decline in many places in the world, it is exactly when these freedoms, freedom of the press and independent judiciary and others are attacked, is when we do see those declines. Jessica, what would you say is the action items that we need to be thinking about? You've mentioned a number in your remarks.
Well, I guess it would be a call to this audience that has so many business leaders and people who are entrepreneurial to think about whether that's something that you're interested in helping to solve. I think I laid out 3 very concrete things, and it can be nonprofit, it can be for-profit, it's just about starting. We'll solve it as we go. You know, I'll quote another president, a Democratic president, John F. Kennedy, said that the free press is the only private business explicitly protected in the Constitution because it's so fundamental to ensuring we have an informed citizenry who can make informed decisions when they vote. You know, Marty couldn't say it more clearly, and you've dedicated your career to this. We need to empower our people with knowledge. So I think it's not just important, but at this moment in our history, it's urgent, and it requires private solutions, private individuals to work with the press.
Excellent. I could continue this conversation for a much longer period. We have 2 extraordinary experts who've shared a lot of very practical, action-oriented solutions, but really also made a compelling case for why the free and independent media is so central to our democracy. So please join me in thanking them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are here with us, we're going to take a very, very short break. I'm stressing very short break, and then come back at 11:30. We try and run everything very much on time here. So short break, back at 11:30 for a private keynote conversation. For those of you who are watching virtually, this concludes our public content. We just thank you for being with us virtually. Enjoy the break.
Thank you.
Thank you.